poured down in thick, heavy sheets. Thunder rumbled across the sky, shaking the ground. The road was dark, wet, and slippery. 6 strangers were trapped in the storm, their cars stuck in deep mud. "We can't stay out here," said David, a tall man with a serious face. "We need to find shelter." Ahead, through the mist, a town appeared. The buildings were old and broken, with windows shattered and doors hanging open. But there were no lights, no people. A town. "Here," whispered Emma, shivering in her wet jacket. "It doesn't look right." "There's nowhere else to go," said Mike, pulling his coat tight. The group, David, Emma, Mike, Sarah, Ben, and Lily, walked into the town. The wind howled through the empty streets. Signs creaked. Somewhere, a door slammed shut on its own. "This place is creepy," Lily muttered. "Let's just find a place to stay until morning," said Ben. "Then we can leave." They found an old hotel. The sign above the door was faded, but the words could still be read. "Welcome to Black Hollow Inn." Sarah pushed open the door. It creaked loudly. Inside, dust covered everything. Chairs were overturned, and old newspapers lay scattered on the floor. But there was no sign of life. "No one's been here for years," Mike said. David walked to the front desk. A small book lay open. The last guest had checked in 50 years ago. "This doesn't make sense," he whispered. Suddenly, from deep inside the hotel, they heard something. A whisper. A voice. Someone was watching them. The whisper was faint, almost like the wind, but it sent chills down their spines. Emma grabbed Mike's arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I think so," Mike replied, his voice unsteady. The group stood frozen in the hotel lobby. The air smelled of damp wood and dust. Cobwebs stretched across the ceiling, and the floor creaked under their weight. The old chandelier above them swayed slightly, though there was no breeze inside. David took a deep breath and shook his head. "It's probably just the wind. This place is old. Let's not scare ourselves for no reason." Ben wasn't convinced. "I don't know, man. It sounded like a voice." Lily looked toward the staircase that led to the upper floors. The wooden steps were covered in dust, but there was something strange. Footprints. Someone had walked up recently. "Guys," she said, pointing at the stairs. The group turned and stared. The footprints were fresh, leading up, but there were no footprints coming down. Sarah swallowed hard. "Someone is here." A heavy silence filled the air. The storm outside roared louder, making the windows rattle. Emma backed toward the front door. "Maybe we should leave." David shook his head. "And go where? The storm is too strong. We're safer in here." Ben sighed. "Fine, but we need to check this place out. If someone's here, we should know." No one wanted to go upstairs, but they had no choice. If there was someone in the hotel, they had to find them. David led the way, stepping carefully on the old wooden stairs. Each step groaned under his weight. The others followed, their hearts pounding. At the top, they found a long hallway lined with doors. Some were open, others closed. Faded wallpaper peeled from the walls, and the air was cold. Too cold. Emma rubbed her arms. It feels like a freezer up here. Mike shivered. How? There's no power. David pushed open the nearest door. Inside was a small hotel room. The bed was still made, as if waiting for a guest. A suitcase sat in the corner, dusty and untouched. Ben stepped forward and picked up a small book from the nightstand. It was a guest journal. He flipped through the pages, but most were empty, except the last entry. It read, "They come at night. They whisper. They watch. Do not look into their eyes. Do not trust the voices. If you hear them call your name, run." A cold breeze swept through the room, though the windows were shut. Then, from the hallway, a door slammed shut. Lily screamed. Lily's scream echoed down the dark hallway. The group turned toward the sound. One of the doors had slammed shut on its own. Emma grabbed Lily's hand. What was that? David took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. It's just the wind. Ben shook his head. There is no wind. We closed all the doors downstairs. The hallway suddenly felt tighter, like the walls were pressing in. The air was cold, almost freezing. David walked toward the door that had slammed shut. It was room 306. The number was barely visible, covered in dust. He reached for the doorknob. It didn't move, locked. "Hello," he called, pressing his ear to the door. Silence. Then tap, tap, tap. A slow, rhythmic tapping from inside the room, like someone was knocking from the other side. Sarah gasped. "Someone's in there." Lily shook her head, stepping back. No one should be here. This place has been abandoned for years." Ben looked at the footprints on the floor again. They led directly to room 306. David knocked on the door. "Is someone inside?" No answer, just the slow tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. Mike's voice was shaky. "Maybe we should go back downstairs." Before anyone could move, the door unlocked on its own. The knob turned, and the door creaked open, just a little. The room inside was completely dark. A deep, cold whisper slid through the air. "Come in." Nobody moved. The door to room 306 stood slightly open, blackness spilling from within. The whisper still echoed in the air. "Come in." Lily grabbed Emma's arm. "Don't go in there." David swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what was worse, going inside or leaving it open behind them. He turned to Ben. "We need to check. If someone's in there, we need to know." Ben hesitated, then nodded. David pushed the door open wider. The room smelled of dust and something else. Something rotten. Inside, the furniture was covered in white sheets. The bed was made, untouched, for years. A tall mirror stood in the corner, covered in a dark cloth, but the strangest thing was the chair in the middle of the room. It was facing the door, and there was something in it. A figure sat there, still and silent. The body was thin, almost skeletal. It wore an old suit, torn and stained. The head was tilted down as if asleep. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Is he alive? David stepped closer. Sir, no response. Ben grabbed his shoulder. Let's go, man. This feels wrong. David ignored him and took another step. He reached out, fingers trembling. Just as he was about to touch the figure's shoulder, its head snapped up. The face was hollow. The eyes were black pits. The mouth stretched into an unnatural grin, as if the skin was being pulled back too far. And then it moved. The figure stood without sound, its feet never touching the floor. The room grew colder. Then it spoke, its voice a dry whisper. You should not have come. The door slammed shut behind them. The room turned ice cold. Their breath came out in white puffs. The figure in the chair stood completely still, its hollow, black eyes staring at them. David grabbed the doorknob and twisted it. Locked. Open it, Emma screamed. Ben banged on the door. Help! Someone help us. The figure's head twitched. Slowly, it raised a thin, bony hand and pointed at them. You do not belong here, it whispered. David pulled harder at the door. Come on. Come on. The lights flickered. Shadows stretched along the walls, moving even though nothing else did. The figure tilted its head, watching them with its empty eyes. Then it took a step forward. Its feet never touched the floor. It floated. Emma backed away. What is that? The thing moved closer. Its mouth stretched open, too wide, too unnatural. Inside was nothing but darkness. A deep, hungry void. Sarah covered her ears. Make it stop. Then the whispering started again. Low voices speaking in a language none of them understood. The walls groaned like they were alive. Ben turned to the window. We have to break it. He grabbed a chair and threw it as hard as he could. The glass did not break. Instead, the window rippled like water. There's no way out, Lily whispered, eyes wide with terror. The figure was almost upon them now. Its long fingers twitched. Its hollow face stretched into something that looked like a smile. David grabbed a lamp from the table and swung it hard. It smashed against the figure's head, but went straight through, like hitting smoke. Then it lunged. A cold force slammed into David's chest, knocking him to the floor. His vision blurred. Something whispered inside his head now, curling around his thoughts. Stay. Become one of us. He screamed, clutching his head. The others rushed to him, pulling him back. The figure stopped. It tilted its head as if confused. Then it faded. The lights flickered once more. Then silence. The door swung open on its own. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Ben grabbed David's arm. "Let's go. Now." They ran. But as they left room 306, Lily glanced back. The chair was empty again. But the mirror in the corner, the one covered by a cloth, had been uncovered, and something inside it was watching them leave. The group ran down the dark hallway, hearts pounding. The air still felt wrong, too cold, too heavy. David staggered, his head spinning. The whisper was still in his mind, soft. But there, stay, belong to us. Emma grabbed his arm. "David, are you okay?" He nodded quickly. But the truth was, he wasn't. Lily stopped at the top of the stairs. "We need to get out of this hotel." Ben shook his head. "And go where? The storm is still outside. We're stuck." They reached the lobby. The old clock on the wall ticked loudly. The front door was still open, showing nothing but rain and darkness outside. Mike turned back toward the staircase. His face was pale. That thing, it wasn't human. Sarah shivered. It was waiting for us, like it knew we would come. David took a deep breath. "We need answers. There has to be something in this town that tells us what's happening. Belong to us." Emma grabbed his arm. "David, are you okay?" He nodded quickly. But the truth was, he wasn't. Lily stopped at the top of the stairs. "We need to get out of this hotel." Ben shook his head. "And go where? The storm is still outside. We're stuck." They reached the lobby. The old clock on the wall ticked loudly. The front door was still open, showing nothing but rain and darkness outside. Mike turned back toward the staircase. His face was pale. That thing, it wasn't human. Sarah shivered. It was waiting for us, like it knew we would come. David took a deep breath. Emma glanced at the hotel's front desk. Papers and an old guest book were scattered across it. "Maybe there's something here." She flipped open the book. The last guest had checked in 50 years ago, but underneath that, written in shaky handwriting, were new words. "Do not look into the mirrors. Do not listen to the whispers. Do not stay after midnight." A chill ran down Emma's spine. She looked at the others. Midnight. What time is it? They all turned to the clock. 47 p.m. 13 minutes left. Then, from upstairs, a loud bang, a door slamming, then another and another. Something was awake. The banging upstairs grew louder. One door, two, three. Each slam echoed through the hotel, like footsteps coming closer. Ben grabbed David's arm. "We have to leave, now." David's head still ached from the whispers, but he forced himself to focus. "We don't know where to go." Emma clutched the guest book. "Do not stay after midnight. We have to get out before it's too late. Mike ran to the front door and looked out. The storm still raged, but something was wrong. The street lights, they were on. That didn't make sense. The town had looked abandoned. There was no electricity. Sarah gasped. The lights weren't on before, Lily whispered. Maybe the town is waking up. A final bang came from upstairs. Then silence. Something was in the hallway above them, watching, waiting. David didn't wait to find out what. Come on. They ran into the storm. Rain poured down, soaking them instantly. The wind howled through the empty town. Buildings lined the street, their windows dark and broken. The only lights came from the old library down the road. Emma pointed. Look, someone's there. The group hurried toward it, slipping on the wet pavement. As they got closer, they saw the door was open, swaying in the wind. Inside, the library was dimly lit by candles. The air smelled of dust and old books. And then they saw it. A figure sat behind a large wooden desk. An old man, thin and pale, dressed in a faded suit. His eyes were dull, almost lifeless. But he was real. David stepped forward. Sir, are you from this town? The old man looked up slowly. His voice was weak, barely a whisper. You shouldn't be here. Ben took a step closer. What is this place? What's happening? The old man's hands trembled as he pointed to the bookshelves. It's all written here. The truth. The town. It does not let people go. Lily shuddered. What do you mean? The man's eyes flicked to the window. His voice dropped lower. They're watching. The group turned. Outside, figures stood in the rain. Dark shapes, motionless, their hollow eyes staring straight at them. The hollow ones had found them. The figures outside did not move. They stood in the rain, their hollow eyes fixed on the library. David whispered, What are they? The old man swallowed hard. They were once like you. Emma's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean? The man's hands trembled as he reached for an old book. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowed with age. He opened it to the middle and slid it toward them. David leaned in and read aloud. In the year 1872, Black Hollow was cursed. The people vanished. But they never left. They became something else. Watchers in the dark. Whisperers in the walls. The hollow ones. Lily shook her head. That's impossible. We saw that thing in the hotel. It wasn't human. The old man nodded slowly. They are not alive, not dead. They are trapped. And now, so are you. A deep chill ran through the group. Sarah clenched her fists. How do we leave? The man exhaled shakily. No one ever leaves. A loud knock at the door. Everyone froze. The old man's face turned pale. Do not open it. Do not look at them. The Knock came again, slow and steady. Ben took a step back. They know we're here. The old man's voice was barely a whisper. They always know. Outside, the figures began to move. One by one, they stepped forward, pressing their hands against the glass. Their faces were empty. No eyes, no mouths, just smooth, featureless skin. Then, the whispering started. Low, crawling voices seeped into the air, the same voices David had heard in room 306. Mike gripped the table. Close your ears, don't listen. But it was already too late. Sarah's eyes glazed over. She stepped toward the door. Sarah! Emma grabbed her, pulling her back. Whispers grew louder. The lights in the library flickered. The air turned freezing. The old man grabbed David's arm. His fingers were ice cold. His voice was urgent. You have until midnight. If you are still here, you will be... The whispers grew louder, wrapping around them like invisible fingers. Stay. Join us. Belong. Ben yanked the back door open. Rain poured outside, but they had no choice. Go, he shouted. They ran into the storm. The town was different now. The buildings that had once looked abandoned were changing. Some had lights on inside, and shadows moved behind the windows. This place is waking up, Lily panted. Sarah stumbled, but Mike caught her. We need to get to the highway. David looked back. The hollow ones were following. They didn't run. They simply glided over the wet pavement, moving too smoothly, too silently. Ben pointed ahead. The main road. If we can reach it, then... The ground cracked open. The pavement split, and dark hands clawed their way out, reaching for them. Lily screamed as fingers brushed her ankle. They're coming from the ground. David grabbed her and pulled her back. Keep running. They leaped over the cracks, dodging the hands reaching for them. The highway was just ahead. A broken road sign pointed the way. Then, out of nowhere, a car. Headlights cut through the rain. A black sedan sped toward them. Sarah's eyes widened. Someone's here. The car skidded to a stop. The driver's door swung open. A woman stepped out. She looked normal. No hollow eyes, no smooth skin. Get in, she yelled. For a second, nobody moved. Then, the hollow ones screamed. A sound like shattering glass filled the air. The figures rushed forward, moving faster than before. David didn't think. He shoved Emma toward the car. Go, go. One by one, they threw themselves into the vehicle. The woman jumped into the driver's seat and slammed the gas pedal. The tires screeched. The car spun around and sped toward the highway. David looked out the window. The hollow ones stood in the middle of the street, watching them go. But this wasn't over, because in the distance, down the long dark highway, a new set of headlights appeared, waiting. The car sped down the highway, rain pounding against the windshield. The woman gripped the wheel tightly, her knuckles pale. Nobody spoke for a moment. The only sound was their heavy breathing and the hum of the engine. David finally broke the silence. "Who are you?" The woman didn't look at him. "My name is Claire." Emma wiped the rain from her face. "How did you know we were in danger?" Claire's jaw tightened. "Because no one leaves Black Hollow. The town doesn't let people go." Lily's voice was shaky. "But you got out." Claire's hands clenched the steering wheel. "For now." David's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" She sighed, glancing at the rearview mirror. "The town is alive. It chooses who stays. If you've seen them, the hollow ones, you're marked. That means it's not over." Ben sat forward. "What happens to people who are marked?" Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. "They disappear." A deep silence filled the car. Sarah hugged her arms. "But we left. We're out." Claire shook her head. "No, look outside." David turned to the window. His blood ran cold. The road stretched endlessly. No road signs, no exits, just darkness. And in the distance, those same headlights, still there, still waiting. Ben whispered, "We're still in Black Hollow." Claire nodded grimly. "The town doesn't need walls to trap you. It just bends reality." Lily's hands shook. "Then how do we escape?" Claire exhaled slowly. "There's only one way." She pulled something from her coat pocket and dropped it onto David's lap. It was a key, old, rusted, and ice cold to the touch. Claire's eyes met his. "You have to go back." David stared at the key in his hand. It was cold as ice, the metal rough and rusted. A strange feeling crept over him, like the key was watching him. Emma swallowed hard. "What does it open?" Claire kept her eyes on the road, the only door that leads out. Ben frowned. "A door? Where?" Claire's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Not where. When?" Silence filled the car. Lily's voice trembled. "What do you mean?" Claire sighed. "Black Hollow isn't just a town. It's a loop, a trap. Everyone who enters is caught in time. This key," she nodded toward David's hand, "unlocks the beginning." David felt his pulse quicken. The beginning of what? Claire finally looked at him, her expression grim. The curse. The rain pounded harder. The headlights behind them never faded. Claire continued, her voice calm but heavy. "The curse started in 1872. That was when the first people disappeared. The town didn't just take them, it rewrote them. Now, they're part of it. The hollow ones." Sarah hugged herself. "But we aren't from 1872. We're from now." Claire shook her head. "It doesn't matter. Black Hollow doesn't care about time. It only cares about who it chooses. And it has chosen you. David's hands clenched around the key. His heart pounded. So you're saying this key takes us back to the start of the curse? Claire nodded. Yes. And if you want to break free, you have to stop it. Ben exhaled shakily. How? How do we stop something from over 100 years ago? Time. It only cares about who it chooses. And it has chosen you. David's hands clenched around the key. His heart pounded. So you're saying this key takes us back to the start of the curse? Claire nodded. Yes. And if you want to break free, you have to stop it. Ben exhaled shakily. How? How do we stop something from over 100 years ago? Claire looked forward. The rain blurred the road, but she drove on. There's a house, she said, at the center of town. The very first house built in Black Hollow. It was where the curse began. Emma whispered, and the key opens it. Yes, Claire said, but once you go inside, there's no turning back. The car fell into silence again. David looked down at the key in his palm. It was heavier now, like it carried the weight of the entire town. He took a deep breath. Then, we go back. Claire nodded. Hold on. She gripped the wheel and turned the car around. The car's tires splashed through deep puddles as Claire sped back toward the town. The rain hadn't stopped. It only grew heavier. David gripped the key tightly. His mind raced. We have to stop the curse. But how? The road twisted, leading them back into Black Hollow. But this time, something was different. The town was alive. Lights flickered inside the old buildings. The streets, once empty, now had shadows moving behind windows. Faint voices drifted through the air, whispers of people who shouldn't exist. Lily shuddered. It wasn't like this before. Claire's voice was tight. Because you have the key now. The town knows. David's stomach churned. Knows what? Claire didn't answer. She just drove faster. Finally, the road ended. And there it was. A massive, decaying house sat in the center of town. The wood was blackened with age, its roof sagging, its windows shattered. The air around it felt wrong. Emma swallowed hard. That's it, isn't it? Claire nodded. The first house ever built in Black Hollow. David stared at it. The house looked dead, but something inside it wasn't. Then, the front door creaked open. A gust of icy wind rushed out. Claire exhaled sharply. You don't have much time. You need to go in. Now. Sarah clutched her arms. And what about you? Claire hesitated. Then she looked at them, her face unreadable. I can't enter, she said softly. David frowned. Why? Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. Because I already did. The words hit the group like a punch. Ben's face paled. Wait, are you saying? Claire didn't let him finish. She pulled something from her pocket, a pocket watch. The hand spun wildly, out of control. She placed it on the dashboard. Inside that house, she whispered, time doesn't work the way you think. The group exchanged nervous glances. David gripped the key harder. His pulse pounded in his ears. There was no choice. They had to go in. Taking the deep breath, he stepped out of the car. The others followed. One by one, they walked up the steps. The front door waited. David raised the key and slid it into the lock. The door swung open, and the darkness inside swallowed them whole. The door slammed shut behind them. Darkness swallowed the group. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, just an eerie, suffocating blackness. Then, a flicker. Oil lamps burst to life along the walls, casting a dim, golden glow. David's breath caught. The house was not abandoned. The rotting furniture, the broken windows, the dust, all gone. Instead, the house looked new. The wooden floors gleamed. A fire crackled in the fireplace. A large clock on the wall ticked softly. Emma gasped. What just happened? Lily's voice was barely a whisper. The house, it went back in time. Sarah turned in a slow circle, eyes wide. This is impossible. Ben stepped toward the fireplace. The warmth felt real. The carved wooden chairs looked recently used. This house is alive, he muttered. David's grip tightened on the key. The air felt heavy, like the walls were breathing, watching. Then, footsteps, soft, slow, coming from the hallway. The group froze. A shadow moved in the doorway. And then, a woman stepped into the light. She was pale and thin, wearing an old-fashioned black dress. Her dark eyes scanned the group, her expression unreadable. You're late, she said. A cold shiver ran down David's spine. Emma swallowed. Late? For what? The woman's lips curled into a strange smile. For dinner. Then, a bell rang. A deep, echoing chime that vibrated through the walls. And suddenly, the house shifted again. The lamps flickered. The air turned cold. The warm glow of the house dimmed, revealing rotting wood, torn wallpaper, and shattered glass. The woman was gone. Sarah's voice shook. What the hell was that? David's pulse pounded. I think we just saw the past. Ben backed up toward the door. We need to get out of here. He grabbed the doorknob and screamed. His hand froze to the metal. The door was ice cold. Lily yanked him back. The house isn't letting us leave. David turned toward the hallway. The shadows seemed deeper now, darker. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. Something else was here, and it was watching them. A cold wind whispered whispered through the house. The fire in the fireplace died instantly, leaving only embers. The shadows along the walls stretched, twisting unnaturally. David's breath came in short gasps. The air was wrong. It was too heavy, too thick, like something unseen was pressing against them. Then, a whisper, soft, crawling, right behind them. You shouldn't be here. Sarah spun around. Who said that? The hallway behind them was empty. Ben took a step back. That wasn't in my head, was it? Lily shook her head, her face pale. No, we all heard it. A long, slow creak echoed through the house. The sound came from upstairs. Then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming down the hall above them. David's hand tightened around the key. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Someone's upstairs. The footsteps stopped. Then, a loud bang. A door slammed shut. The group jumped. Sarah grabbed David's arm. I don't like this. David took a deep breath. He had to be strong. They had come here to end the curse. Running wasn't an option. We need to see what's up there, he said. Ben's eyes widened. Are you insane? David turned to Claire's pocket watch, still clutched in his palm. The hands were spinning faster now. Tick, tick, tick. Something was changing. We don't have time, David said. If we don't find answers, we're going to be trapped here forever. Emma nodded hesitantly. He's right. The key led us here for a reason. Lily exhaled shakily. I hate this. I really hate this. David took the first step toward the stairs. The wood groaned under his weight. The others followed slowly, their breathing shallow. As they climbed higher, the air grew colder. The walls looked older now, decayed and cracked like the house was aging around them. Then they reached the second floor, and everything was silent. The hallway stretched before them, lined with doors. Some were slightly open, others hung off their hinges. At the very end of the hallway, one door stood closed, the one that had slammed shut. David swallowed hard. He could feel it. Something was waiting inside, and it knew they were coming. David stood in front of the closed door. The others crowded behind him, their breath shaky, their bodies tense. Something was inside. The air was wrong. Heavy. Cold. The closer he got, the harder it was to breathe. Like the house itself was pressing down on him. The others felt it too. Emma whispered, maybe we shouldn't. Then, tap, single knock, from the other side of the door. Everyone froze. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Ben took a step back. Lily shook her head violently. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Tap, tap. David's fingers curled around the key. His hands were slick with sweat. Something inside the room wanted them to open the door. Emma grabbed his arm. David, don't. David took a deep breath. They had come this far. He raised the key to the lock. Click. The door swung open. The room was empty. No furniture, no dust. Just 4 bare walls and a single window. The air inside felt different. Thick. Heavy. David's stomach twisted. This wasn't right. Then Lily gasped. Look. David followed her gaze, and his blood ran cold. The shadows on the floor were moving, not like the flicker of candlelight, not like normal darkness. They were alive. They shifted and twisted, crawling up the walls. Ben's voice shook. What the hell is that? Emma grabbed at David's arm. We need to go. Then the door slammed shut. The room plunged into darkness. Sarah screamed. Ben pounded on the door. Open it! Open it! David spun around, heart racing. And then the whispers began. You don't belong here. You opened the door. Now it's ours. The shadows rushed toward them. Cold fingers brushed David's face. The darkness wrapped around his throat. He couldn't breathe. The last thing he heard was Emma screaming his name. Then everything went black. David's eyes snapped open. Darkness. At first, he thought he was still inside the room, but no, this was different. The air was thick, heavy, suffocating. His breath came in short gasps. His body felt weightless, like he was floating. Then, slowly, the darkness shifted. Shapes moved around him. Shadows stretched and twisted, forming what looked like faces, whispering, watching, waiting. A chill ran down his spine. Where am I? David tried to move, but his body felt strange. His limbs were sluggish, like he was trapped in deep water. He turned his head and froze. He was not alone. Shapes drifted in the darkness. Figures. They had human forms, but their faces were empty, hollow, the hollow ones. David's breath caught in his throat. One of them slowly turned its head toward him. Its voice was a soft, inhuman whisper. You opened the door. David stumbled back. The space around him rippled as if the air itself was liquid. A second figure moved closer. Its body stretched unnaturally, its fingers long and sharp. Now you belong to us. David's heart pounded. No, he whispered. I'm not one of you. The shadows pressed closer. The whispering grew louder. You don't have a choice. Then, a sudden, blinding light. David felt himself pulled backward. The darkness tore away, the whispers fading into the distance. And then, he woke up. David gasped, sitting up fast. His chest heaved. His skin was cold and damp with sweat. He was back in the house. The others were there too. Emma, Ben, Sarah, and Lily. They lay motionless on the floor, their breathing shallow. David's hands shook. What just happened? Had they all been in that place. Before he could think, a voice whispered in his ear, "You brought something back." David's blood ran cold. He slowly turned his head, and a shadow moved behind him. David's breath hitched. He wasn't alone. The whisper still echoed in his ears. "You brought something back." He turned his head slowly. A shadow moved. Not on the wall, not in the corner. It was standing behind him, tall, thin, watching. Its body was wrong. Too long, too stretched. Its fingers twitched as if testing the air. David's heart pounded. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy, sluggish. The thing took a step forward. The air grew colder. The room around him felt smaller, like the house itself was pressing in. David tried to speak, but his voice was gone. Then Emma gasped. Emma sat up fast, eyes wide. She shook violently, like waking from a nightmare. Ben groaned, holding his head. Sarah and Lily gasped for air, their faces pale. Something was wrong. Emma clutched her chest. "I saw them." Ben's hands trembled, the hollow ones. "I was trapped in the dark." Lily whimpered. "They were whispering. She stopped, eyes darting around. Then she saw David, or rather, what stood behind him. Her face twisted in horror. "David," she whispered. Sarah followed her gaze. Her skin turned pale. "Oh my God." David's stomach dropped. He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. He already knew it was there. David's heartbeat thundered in his chest. He still didn't turn around. The others stared in horror at whatever stood behind him. The air grew colder. The walls seemed to bend, to breathe. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "David, move." Ben's face was pale. "Don't turn around." David's fingers twitched. His body screamed to run, to escape. But something held him in place. Then the thing behind him breathed, a long, slow, rattling breath. The sound was wrong, like something old, broken, and starving. David's body locked up. It was too close, right behind his ear. The room felt smaller. The floorboards groaned. No one moved. No one even breathed. Then, a whisper. Not words, just a sound. A low, crawling hiss that slithered into David's ear. His stomach twisted, his vision blurred. The key in his hand burned ice cold. He bit his lip. His voice shook. What do you want?" Silence. Then, a single, slow tap. The thing's finger tapped his shoulder. Once. David felt it. Cold. Thin. Not human. Emma let out a small, choked sob. Then, the lights flickered, and the thing moved. Not away. Closer. The shadows deepened, and then the light went out. The lights went out. David froze. The room vanished into pure, suffocating blackness. A deep, unnatural cold wrapped around him, His breath came in short, panicked gasps. Then, movement. Not just one thing, many. The darkness shifted, swirled, crawled. David tried to speak, but no sound came out. Then, a voice, not human, low, crawling, everywhere at once. Now, you see, David's stomach twisted, his hands trembled. He wanted to run, to move, but he couldn't. The shadows wrapped around him. Something cold brushed his neck. A whisper slithered into his ear. Stay with us. Then, a hand grabbed his wrist. Warm, human. Emma's voice cut through the dark. David, run. David's body unlocked. He yanked free from the shadows. His legs felt like lead, but he forced himself forward. Emma's fingers found his. The others moved in the dark, gasping, stumbling. Ben's voice was sharp with panic. Where's the door? Lily choked out a sob. We're trapped. Sarah's voice trembled. It's not real. The house. It's playing with us. The shadows swirled. David felt the cold creep back in. And then, a small, distant flicker. A light. Faint. Flickering. David ran toward it. The others followed. The shadows screamed. And then, the light exploded. The world spun. David hit the ground, hard, and everything went silent. David's eyes snapped open. His body ached. His skin was cold, damp. His breath came in short, panicked gasps. He was lying on something hard. Wood. The floor. But not the same floor. The smell was different. The air felt wrong. Slowly, he pushed himself up and froze. This wasn't the house. The others lay beside him, unconscious. Emma, Ben, Sarah, Lily. David's heart pounded. He shook Emma's shoulder. Emma, wake up. She gasped, awake, eyes wide with fear. Ben groaned, rubbing his head. What happened? Sarah sat up fast, her breathing shaky. We were in the dark. The shadows. Lily whimpered. We ran toward the light, and then her voice faded. She looked around, and her face turned white. David followed her gaze, and his stomach dropped. They were inside a different house, but this one was worse. The walls were rotted. The floorboards were warped, cracked. The windows were covered in grime. No light came through. Everything smelled of mold, decay, and something else, something dead. Ben stumbled to his feet. We need to get out of here. David nodded. He turned toward the front door. Only there was no door. His chest tightened. What the hell? Sarah's voice shook. There was a door. Right. They all stared at the wall. A wall that shouldn't have been there. Emma's hands trembled. This place isn't real. David's fingers curled into fists. Then we need to find a way out. Ben pointed to a hallway. We go that way. Sarah swallowed hard. But what if Ben cut her off? Standing here won't help. David agreed. So they moved, one step at a time, deeper into the house that shouldn't exist. And behind them, the wall shifted. David led the way. The hallway stretched too far. The deeper they walked, the colder it got. The air smelled of mold, dust, and something rotten. The walls groaned like the house was breathing. Lily's fingers clutched David's sleeve. Something feels wrong. David didn't answer. He already knew. They passed empty rooms, a broken chair, a mirror covered in grime, a torn carpet. Nothing made sense. Sarah stopped walking. Guys, look. They turned. Their footprints in the dust were gone. Ben's voice shook. The house is swallowing them. Emma swallowed hard. Or erasing them. Lily whimpered. We need to. Creak. Everyone froze. That sound wasn't them. It came from the hallway behind them. Something was there. David turned slowly. The hallway was empty, dark, silent, but something felt different. His skin prickled, his chest tightened. Something was watching them. Ben whispered, "Let's keep moving." David nodded. Step by step, they moved forward. Then, another creak. Closer. Emma grabbed David's hand. It's following us. David's breath came faster. Don't run, just walk. Sarah's voice trembled. What if it? The lights flickered. Then, a whisper. Low, crawling, right behind them. Why did you come? Lily screamed. David spun around, and something stood in the dark, tall, twisted, waiting. The lights went out, and everything collapsed into blackness. David couldn't see. The air was thick, pressing down on him. Then, a breath right in front of him, too close. The stench of rot, decay, something old. David's fingers tightened into fists. He felt Emma beside him, trembling. Ben's whisper was barely there. Don't move. Then, something brushed against David's arm. Thin, cold, like fingers. David's blood ran cold. The thing was touching him. A dim, flickering glow shimmered in the dark. Not from the house. From the thing. Its body was twisted, stretched. Its limbs bent the wrong way. And its face. No. It had no face. Only a gaping black hole where its mouth should be. And from that hole, it whispered, a soft, crawling sound that slithered into David's ears. Stay with us, David snapped. He grabbed Emma's hand and ran. The others followed. The thing screamed. Not a normal scream. A sound that split the air, tore into their skulls. The floor shook. The walls bent. David didn't stop. He couldn't. They had to get out. Somehow, David ran. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Emma's hand was tight in his. The others followed close behind. The thing's scream still echoed, twisting the air, making the walls tremble. But no matter how fast they ran, the hallway stretched longer. The door at the end kept moving away. Ben gasped. This hallway, it's not real. Sarah's breath came fast. It's keeping us trapped, Lily sobbed. Then where do we go? David gritted his teeth. Think. This place wasn't normal. It was alive. It could shift, change, which meant they had to break it. David skidded to a stop. Emma nearly crashed into him. David, what? He turned fast. The hallway behind them had changed. A door now stood there. A door that wasn't there before. It was old, blackened with soot, dripping with something dark. But it was a way out. David didn't hesitate. He yanked it open. And behind it, nothing. A gaping void. A space that shouldn't exist. Dark. Endless. A whisper rose from the abyss. Come closer. David's skin prickled. Then, a hand reached out from the void. Long, thin, too many fingers, reaching for him. David's breath caught in his throat. The hand from the void twitched. Its fingers, too long, too many joints, reached for him. The whispering grew louder. Come closer. The voice was inside his head, crawling, twisting, pulling. David's body leaned forward. No. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stop. Emma grabbed his arm. David, don't, Lily sobbed. Close it, close it. But Ben was staring. His eyes glazed over. His body swayed. He took a step toward the door. Sarah's scream shattered the air. Ben, stop. Too late. The hand snapped forward. It grabbed Ben's wrist. Ben screamed. The thing pulled. David lunged. No. He grabbed Ben's other arm, yanking him back. But the thing was strong. Ben's body jerked violently. His feet lifted off the ground. The void sucked him in. Darkness swallowed his legs, his waist, his chest, his face twisted in pure terror. Don't let go. David pulled harder. Emma and Sarah grabbed Ben too. The thing hissed. The shadows crawled up Ben's skin. His veins turned black. Then the thing spoke. He is already ours. Ben's body lurched forward, and then he was gone, swallowed by the void. The door slammed shut, and Ben's scream faded into nothing. Silence. The air felt heavier. Lily collapsed, sobbing. Ben is gone. Emma covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Sarah shook her head, tears falling. We couldn't save him. David stared at the door. His hands trembled. His heart ached. Ben was gone. The house had taken him, and they were still trapped. David's fists clenched. No more running. They had to find a way to end this before the house took all of them. David's fists clenched. Ben was gone. The house had taken him, and they were next. No more running, no more hiding. They had to fight back. But how? Emma wiped her tears. We can't stay here. Sarah's voice shook. But where do we go? The house changes every time. David thought fast. The house is alive. That means it has a weakness. Something keeping it strong. Lily's breath hitched. You mean it can be destroyed? David nodded. We have to find what's feeding it. Then the walls shuddered. The floor cracked beneath them. Something groaned, deep, hollow. Emma whispered, "It knows." A long, deep crack ran across the hallway. Beyond it, a hidden door, one that hadn't been there before. David's pulse quickened. That's it, Sarah swallowed. What if it's another trap? David shook his head. Then we have no choice but to risk it. He grabbed the handle. It burned like something inside was alive. Lily whispered, "Be careful." David turned the knob, and the door swung open. A spiral staircase led down. Black stone, cold air. Whisper crawled up from the dark. You shouldn't be here. Emma's grip tightened on David's arm. This feels wrong. David's chest tightened. It was wrong, but it was also the only way. He took a deep breath, then stepped down. The others followed, and behind them, the door vanished. David stepped down. The stone steps were ice cold. The air grew heavy, thick, like walking through water. A deep hum vibrated through the walls. Something was alive down here, and it was waiting. Emma whispered, "How far down does this go?" No one answered. The staircase spiraled forever. Each step creaked, groaned. Sarah's breath shook. What if this never ends? Lily whimpered. We have to turn back. David clenched his jaw. There is no back. They looked up. The top was gone. Only darkness above, darkness below. The house had sealed them in. Then, a sound. Thump, thump. Like a heartbeat. Loud, slow, alive. Emma grabbed David's arm. Do you hear that? Lily's voice quivered. It sounds like something breathing. Sarah's eyes widened. We're walking into its stomach. David's fingers curled into fists. No, not its stomach. Its heart. The thing keeping the house alive. They had to destroy it. Finally, the steps ended. A black stone floor stretched out before them. In the center, a massive wooden door, old, rotting, covered in symbols. It throbbed like it was breathing. David swallowed hard. This was it, the source, the thing feeding the house. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. What happens if we open it? David stepped forward. There's only one way to find out. His hand reached for the handle, and behind them, something moved. David's hand froze on the door handle. Something moved behind them. Slow, heavy, breathing. The air thickened. A deep shadow stretched across the stone floor. Lily squeezed her eyes shut. Tell me that's not. David turned around and saw it. A figure stood at the bottom of the stairs. Tall, too tall. Its body was stitched together. Pieces of flesh hanging loose. Its arms long, twisted, dragging on the floor. And its face, there wasn't one. Only a hollow, gaping hole where its head should be. And from that hole, a sound, a gurgling breath, then a whisper. You shouldn't have come. Sarah stumbled back. What is that? Emma grabbed David's arm. We have to run. But there was nowhere to go. The stairs were gone. The door was behind them, and the thing was blocking their way. It stepped forward. Thump. The ground shook. Lily screamed. It's coming. The thing's arms lifted, fingers twitching, reaching. The door. David's mind raced. This thing, it wasn't just a monster. It was a guardian. It was protecting the door, protecting whatever was inside. And that meant inside. That door was the key to ending everything. David turned to the others. We have to get past it. Emma's eyes widened. How? David's fingers tightened into fists. We fight. The thing lunged, and the air exploded with screams. The creature lunged. Its long arms swung forward. David ducked. Wham! The creature's fist slammed into the wall, cracking the stone. Dust rained down. The ground shook. Lily screamed. It's too strong. David's mind raced. They couldn't win in a fight, but they had to get past it. And the only way was through. Emma's voice shook. David, what do we do? The creature turned toward them. Its hollow face tilted, listening, waiting. David's breath hitched. It was blind. That's why it hadn't attacked right away. It could only hear them. David's heart pounded. Stay completely still. The others froze. The creature didn't move. It just stood there, listening, waiting for a sound. One wrong breath, and it would strike. David's pulse pounded in his ears. They had to get to the door, but how without making a sound? Then a whisper filled the air. You cannot pass. The creature's arms twitched. David's fingers tightened into fists. They had one chance. A distraction. He slowly reached into his pocket. A metal lighter. Small, but enough. David took a deep breath, then threw it. The lighter clattered against the far wall. The creature's head snapped toward the noise. And then it charged. Boom. Stone exploded as the creature slammed into the wall. Dust filled the air. David didn't hesitate. Go. The group sprinted for the door. The creature screeched. It turned too late. David grabbed the door handle. It burned his skin. The house was fighting back. Emma helped him push. The door groaned. Behind them, the creature recovered. It charged. Sarah sobbed. Hurry! David gave one final shove. The door swung open, revealing the beating heart of the house. Massive. David stumbled forward. The room beyond the door was massive, and in the center, a heart. Not a normal heart. A huge, pulsing mass of flesh. Black veins throbbed along its surface. It was alive, and it was the source of everything. Emma gasped. What is that? Sarah shook her head. It's keeping the house alive, Lily whispered. Then we have to kill it. David turned. The creature was coming. Fast. Angry. They had seconds. David grabbed a broken pipe from the ground. His hands shook. How did they destroy something this big? One night, David woke up cold. His breath fogged in the air. He sat up and saw it, the black doorway, standing in the middle of his room. A voice whispered from the dark, It's not over. David's chest tightened. He knew then the house had never been a place. It was a curse, and now it belonged to them forever. and the hollow ones could rise again. The end. And the hollow ones could rise again. The end.